and welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar today entitled Delivering the Best of Human Capital Management and Global Talent Mobility with Topia and Workday. If you do have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A chat and we will pick them up towards the end of the session. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Chantel.
Yes, hi Holly, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Chantel Rowe, and I am the Director of Product here at Topia. And as part of my role, I look after all of our platform and integration strategies. So how we work with other systems and other providers, particularly including HR systems like Workday. My background, just a quick intro. I've come from the mobility space. So I was in mobility consulting in Big Four for many years, and then ran a mobility program at a French investment bank for a few years as well. So being on both sides of the table before coming to Topia to design the solutions that we put into the market for mobility teams, HR teams, and talent acquisition teams. So what we are going to talk through today is we're going to specifically look at how mobility and Workday interact. And these challenges and solutions carry over different HRIS as well, but we're going to take a particular focus today on Workday. So we're going to look at the challenges that companies face in supporting mobility through Workday. We're going to look at how the approved Topia-Workday integration supports solving those challenges and tries to remove some of those barriers for the business. And then we're going to look at the Topia and Workday systems and how they work together in a live demo, and look at some of the benefits of connecting those systems. So why do companies struggle to manage mobility in Workday? We've worked with a lot of our customers who are mutual Topia Workday customers, and also a lot of just other companies in the market who are going through implementations of Workday or trying to optimize Workday, particularly for mobility. And what we see companies struggling with is firstly a lack of global HRIS recruitment and payroll systems. Whilst they might use Workday in one location, they don't necessarily use Workday in multiple locations. And so things like moving people between different countries, between different entities, where those countries or entities are not using the same systems becomes very tricky. And when we look at recruitment systems, for example, much of the mobility undertaken by companies is moving people to take up a role with the company. And where you're not using the same recruitment and HR systems, that transition or capture of that mobility data for those new hires becomes very tricky as well. There's a need to simulate and plan for a move or mobility without actually impacting existing employee data. So how can we actually look at what this would be like to move this employee from one location to the other, or have them working between different locations? What would we have to pay them? How much would this cost the business? How would this affect their reporting or organizational structure? And it's very hard to do that without actually changing anything within Workday. So going through that simulation and planning process is hard without actually touching or having irreversible impacts on the HR data. There's downstream impacts to moving people around your organization, obviously, to things like headcount, payroll, cost allocation. And with mobility, that makes it very hard to, for example, have somebody who maybe is working between 3 locations, reporting into one location, on the headcount of another location, and the costs are split between multiple locations. Most HR systems, and indeed Workday, struggle to handle those international splits. And these rules may differ based on the location of the individual, their role, the policy that they're under from a mobility perspective. So it's very hard to be able to move a record within an HR system without having adverse downstream impacts on those other finance and organizational functions. Just quite simply, there's a lack of ability to hold 2 sets of compensation data. People may be receiving one set of core compensation, which will change for a temporary period whilst they're abroad. And that is not able to be captured in Workday today. Whilst Workday does handle transferring an individual from one location to another or assigning an individual from one location to another, Things like people who commute, business travelers who are constantly on business travel, people who rotate between different locations, interns who may come into one location for 3 months and then leave. So these more kind of creative or newer definitions of mobility aren't handled well in Workday. And mobile employees tend to have different types of compensation packages. They may get additional allowances like quality of life allowances, cost of living allowances, hardship premiums, housing benefits. They may be paid in one location but continue to contribute to a pension scheme in another, or still be covered by an international medical plan. And these are generally falling outside of the normal bounds of the compensation packages and setup within Workday. So how we see customers generally try to work around this is they use a variety of different techniques within Workday. They may use the start and assignments functionality. They may use a change job functionality. They may add another job to the person's role. They may make that their primary job, they may not. Some people actually terminate and rehire the employee every time they move that person from a location to a location. And some customers set up custom employee types. So rather than being a regular or a temp, you may be an expat, and that's how you're differentiated. But I think the key thing that we saw as we were building out our integration with Workday is that the way that customers use these different types of functions or business processes within Workday was very inconsistent. And normally it was more about, well, which process can we use to cause the least downstream impacts to headcount, finance, planning, reporting, rather than which actually is the best process to represent what we are trying to do with this employee. And then there's just a general disconnect between mobility and talent data. So whilst you obviously have your employee record in Workday, when you then go to move that person, that connection of, am I moving the right person? Do they have the right talent profile, the right fit for this move? Am I moving them for the right reasons? Is this business driven? Is it project driven? Can we not get the right resource locally? How is this impacting their team in the location that they're leaving? Are they a critical role? Is this going to leave a big impact for the team? Do we not have the kind of bench strength behind this individual to fill the role? And then for the employee, how does this impact their career? Going through the mobility process in Workday and going through a performance process in Workday are generally very disconnected. And so it's hard to make these connections and see, as you're planning that mobility, are we doing this for the right reasons, the right people, the right locations with the right downstream impacts and objectives? So Workday and Topia came together. We are a Workday Ventures partner, which is, it's a program for companies who really complement and work side by side with the Workday product suite. So Workday, by their own admission, have not focused on mobility in the past. It's obviously a process which generally touches a smaller part of the population of the company. And is very complex and has a lot of downstream impacts. So whilst they do obviously support some aspects of mobility and they are increasing that functionality, they accept that it's not their core focus, and they look to companies to complement the strengths that Workday have with the strengths that they need as well. And Topia really is that strength for them for mobility solutions. We have developed and are continuing to develop and expand an off-the-shelf integration for both HCM and payroll data and workflows between the two systems, really with the aim of removing that fragmentation, planning and going through the processes of managing mobile populations between Workday and Topia should be incredibly smooth, incredibly efficient, and we're going to see that as we go through the demo today. So how do we do that? At a high level, Workday will always be your place to identify, track talent, skills match to global opportunities. If you have a requisition or a role and you need to fill it, how do you understand who is the best person from a skills perspective, from a job level perspective, to fill that role? Topia first comes into the equation where we want to start simulating or planning for those moves. So say I've identified a role in China and a candidate in Germany. How do I go about understanding how much this is going to cost? how this is going to be possible from a visa perspective, what are the tax implications, what would I need to provide to the employee to support them as they're going through that experience. And then actually executing that move. So working with our integrated vendors to actually then plan out, execute that move and physically support the individual moving from A to B. Workday continues to be that place where you manage your global workforce and administration and performance. So things like the organizational structure, performance reviews, managing that person's talent profile, managing their core employee data, who they report into, where they live, their addresses, their spousal details, still remains within Workday as the core HRIS. Topia, throughout the mobility experience, then coordinates all of those mobility operations, workflows, data, and compliance. So things like maybe global tax filing coordination, ongoing immigration support, pay reviews, where these involve multiple elements of mobility compensation, salary paid across different locations, and basically those mobility-specific processes that aren't touched by Workday today. Topia, through our Topia Pay module, can calculate global expat and shadow payroll requirements. So for employees that don't just work in one location and are paid in that location, we manage all of those complexities of employees who need to be paid or need to pay taxes, social security, etc., across multiple locations in the world due to their global work. Workday then manages that actual global payroll delivery through either the Workday payroll module or their integrations with your payroll provider. Topia has all of the program analytics and insights around the mobility program, who you're moving, why, where, tracking visas, tracking tax filing requirements, as we're going to see in the demo. And Workday is ultimately your core platform for global workforce analytics. So while we feed that data back into Workday, you're able to see and combine that mobility data and your regular global workforce data in Workday in one set of reporting systems. And just taking one practical example, which is how we go through that planning process. Topia really sits in the middle here in terms of when you're ready to start planning for a new move or mobility experience. We're using the Workday Get Workers, Get Applicants, and also if you don't have a global HRIS, having those connections to be able to get information from different systems depending on location. We're using those integrations to then pull core data into Topia, allowing you to play around, simulate, run cost simulations and projections, gain approvals for moves, etc. within Topia. And then when you're ready to actually execute that move, and only when you've gone through those different simulations and optimizations, we're feeding back via the start assignment, change job, or add additional job processes back to Workday and putting that new role information, that new compensation information back into Workday. And the key thing here is that we're the ones kind of absorbing all that strange kind of funky logic for mobility. So say, for example, you as a company use a start assignment process if the move is going to China, but you're using a change job or an add additional job if the move is going to somewhere within Europe because of how you've got Workday set up for Europe. Maybe different move types. So a move less than 12 months or more than 12 months is performed differently within your Workday system. All that logic is set up to within Topia. So when we trigger that feed back to your Workday system, we are making sure that we're sending the right data, using the right business process to the right HRIS globally for that particular case. And what this ultimately means is that Topia becomes, firstly, the connector between your different global systems. So we are connecting effectively and aggregating all of that data in a consistent way between your different HR systems, your global recruitment systems, performance, payroll systems. And we're channeling that data in, regulating it all so you have one core data set about your mobility population within Topia. And then sending that back out to the respective systems in the way that they're expecting it downstream. We have all of that strange logic that deals with different behavior based on policies, locations, employee types, etc., so that we can capture those different global processes based on those attributes. We hold both home and host compensation, role, org structure details, which enable you, even for someone on, for example, a long-term assignment, say 5 to 10 years, you can continue to basically track almost a shadow record of that person in their home location that they will be returning to, whilst also obviously having their current role, current compensation, current org structure within Topia. So you're able to see both, and when it comes time to return that individual to the home location, you've continued tracking both their home and host situations within Topia. We manage all kinds of mobility. So everything from your traditional permanent transfers, new hires who need to be relocated, long-term, short-term assignments, but also commuters and business travelers and rotators and interns and all these different populations, particularly where those populations shouldn't even impact Workday at all. So if you have an individual in Workday who travels to different locations 30% of the time, this may have absolutely no impact on their Workday record at all. But in Topia, they're a business traveler. You know exactly where they've been, when. You can see information about the work permits they have. You can see them and track them as a mobility case. And then we have purpose-built management of mobility compensation. So things like managing mobility allowances, benefits in kind, tax gross-ups that might be paid globally, the interaction with foreign pension and benefit plans. So we're deliberately set up to be able to manage those benefit types and manage the allowances and benefits in kind that are pretty much only given to mobility cases and wouldn't normally touch your wider employee population. And at a super high level, that's going to drive 4 things. Firstly, that integration is going to drive efficiency. Obviously, any minimization of duplication of data input, not having to double touch a process, is going to drive efficiency and gains for your team. Data integrity, so not only the accuracy of data, but also the completeness of data. Anytime you have to manually key something into a system, your first instinct is going to be, do I actually need to put this in this system, or can I do without it? That means you have less data, less power, less insights in your data in those systems. So by pulling all that data over seamlessly through the integration, you're going to have a complete data set in Topia and a complete data set in Workday that's all in sync and accurate. Connecting that mobility data, so we'll see as we just go quickly through the demo, having that view of mobility, but also talent, performance, diversity side by side allows you to look at someone not only as a person moving from China to Germany, but a high performer who currently has a high retention risk and is deemed critical to the team, giving them an opportunity to move to Germany. And then reporting and analytics. So if you're able to optimize the way that you use reporting between Workday, which obviously has very, very powerful workforce analytics, with Topia and our insights into mobility functions and programs, you're going to be able to see your mobility program and how that is supporting your global workforce from different angles. So let's take a look at what this looks like in the platform. So first, if we take a look at Topia, and I'm just going to show you how that data that we're interacting with within Workday is really optimizing the way that you're using Topia to plan for mobility. So let's start first with an initiation. I'm thinking of moving Patrick O'Brien and sending him on an assignment. So quite simply, when I start to kick off the process of planning for a new move, I've put in Patrick's employee ID, and firstly, I'm pulling through all of the details about where he is currently, his personal details, family details, organization details, his role, and also his talent profile and performance information. So as I'm considering him as a person, with one click of a button, I can put in his employee ID here and pull in pertinent information about him as an employee into the system. Downstream, when I'm looking at someone like Hayato Nakamura, we've gone through the planning process of her assignment in Topia. So she's currently being planned to go on a short-term assignment from Japan to Australia. We have estimated the cost of this assignment within Topia. So we can see all of the different mobility parts of compensation that we're going to give her, everything from training her a little bit on the culture in Australia, shipping some goods, supporting her and her family for immigration purposes, ongoing trips back to Japan, housing support in Australia, and all of the tax implications of that move to the company. We're overlaying that with the business case, her talent profile, so that we can see that she's currently a kind of meets expectations performer with a medium risk of leaving the company and a moderate impact to the company. She's not a high performer, so this should factor into when I'm looking at the amount that I'm planning to spend on mobility for her. This talent profile should factor into that decision. I can see all the details about her home and host role and her family situation and the policy benefits that we're looking to support her with. So we're able to present to the business a full package of to consider when thinking about how and if we're going to give this mobility experience to Hayato. If we want to look at our employees who may have gone on mobility experiences previously, I'm going to look at Brandon Harris. And this is where I'm starting to consider how mobility has impacted or is supporting the business, supporting our talent objectives, supporting retention, supporting performance improvement, etc. So I can see that, for example, Brandon, he joined the company in 2000. We waited 20 long years to send him finally on a long-term assignment to maybe to try and incentivize him or give him a new opportunity. Unfortunately, that lasted about 6 months and he's now left the company and has been hired by a competitor. So really not a good result here. And potentially from mobility team, this is a good indication that maybe we should have looked to engage Brandon sooner. You know, why did it take us 20 years to give him that opportunity? And then really for us, this is a sunk cost. We put a lot of probably money into sending Brandon to Australia, maybe moving him and his family there, and then we lost him to a competitor 6 months later. I can see, and this is all thanks to that integration with Workday, that not only brings that data over to begin with at the start of the move, but continues to sync it throughout Brandon's career. So we can see that actually he was a really high performer. He exceeded expectations. He was seen as promotable with a significant loss impact rating to the company. He was a high performer and he was on our talent development program, which makes that loss even a little more bitter. If I need to see more information, so maybe I'm reviewing this and thinking, hey, who was Brandon's manager at the time that he left the company? Let me find out what went wrong here. I can link straight through to Workday and come straight through to Brandon's employee profile. And I can find out that Angela was actually his manager. So I'm going to get in touch with her to find out more details about what went wrong here. As I'm looking at managing the move within Topia, if I have a look at Thomas Turner here, who is in the process of planning a long-term assignment from Brussels to Paris, without even touching Workday at all and putting any data into Workday, we've been able to plan out the mobility policy that we're going to present or give to Thomas to support him on his move. We're currently going through the business proposal steps. We're then going to create relocation letters, assignment letters. We're going to gather information from Thomas, and then we're going to coordinate all of the different providers, whether they're immigration providers, relocation providers, etc., to support him throughout his move. We're going to track all of those tasks, all of the delivery of those benefits to Thomas. So we can track, for example, the process of his immigration application with Fragaman, all of the cost and financial details of his move, and all while being synced with Workday throughout that period. And finally, just to touch on the reporting functionalities, we can come in to Topia's Insights module. And if I look at reports, we can look at our people, our mobility program, our finance and operations from a mobility perspective. So maybe I want to look at the talent profile dashboard of my mobile population. thanks to that data, again, that we're constantly syncing with Workday, I can see that only, well, 13% of my mobile population are currently deemed to be exceeding or exceptional performers. So this for me is telling me, for example, that I'm not potentially sending my top performers on mobility experiences. Maybe we're using mobility for more functional reasons, such as not being able to find local talent, project teams, etc., that need to be mobilized, not that we're potentially looking to develop those people internally. Then quickly flipping to Workday, that feedback to Workday that I mentioned here, once that planning process is being completed within Topia, we're going to feed that new information, the details of the mobility experience back into back into Workday. And here, if I'm Logan, I've got these new tasks to review an end assignment, a start new assignment, starting an additional job that have come through to me once everything's been signed off in Topia. And I'm able then to approve that change within Workday and update the record within Workday. So you can see, if I come back to the presentation here, you can see that benefit of the joint connection between Workday and Topia, making it a very smooth process to mobilize the workforce. This is just phase one for us. So that key data exchanges is phase one of our integration with Workday. Phase two, we'll be looking at and focusing around payroll and compensation. So looking at the payroll module within Workday and how we feeding allowances and compensation directly into the payroll module. We'll then look at connecting some more of those workflows. So maybe compensation review workflows, termination workflows for the mobile population, before starting to look at connecting the user experiences between the two systems. So how do we actually allow you to go between the two systems much more easily, maybe embedding each system within the other so that we can improve and connect that user experience more closely. And I'm going to leave it there because I know we're at time. So I'll hand it back to Holly. Have we got any quick questions that we want to go through as a final Q&A? Or please feel free to reach out to me on the details. Very easy, Chantel@topia.com. If you have any other questions or want to see this in more detail.
No, thanks. That was wonderful. Thank you to Chantel, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. As Chantel said, if you do think of any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will be sending out the recording shortly, and we hope you have an enjoyable rest of your day.